Welcome to Antosic's Art Room. Let's learn. Today I'm going to show you how to add movement and interest to a photograph by using After Effects to make it have a 3D effect, such as this. Many people choose to do this to add interest when they're talking about some sort of event or story, but they don't have actual video footage. Adding this to your photograph can make people more interested in looking at it, and if you incorporate other tools and things into there, you can make it look really fancy. Okay, here we go. The first thing you need to do is take your photograph, and in Photoshop, you want to separate into at least 3 different layers: foreground, middle ground, and background. This is a photograph I have here that I did of my sister and her now husband at the time during an engagement photo shoot. So they were playing around in the park, and here's a tree, lovely nice little photo. I've already gone ahead and made the different layers, so let me show you what that looks like. We have our background layer, and what I did was I used the clone tool to fill in the space. Because you're going to be moving through these layers, you don't want to have white space when you separate if you're copying and cutting and pasting, so you want to somehow fill it in. You don't want to fill it in all the way. Like, for example, this tree, we're not going to see in the middle of this tree because it's always going to be there, but I just went ahead and did it anyway because why not? Then I separated different layers. The next layer would have been them, so there they are. That comes next, that pops out. The tree is there. I decided to add my sister's hand to the tree over here because it was in front of her, and then I added the foreground, which if you look at just what that looks like plain, there it is. There's the tree. I filled in the bottom of the tree here a little bit so that when this was on top, it wasn't just plain on the bottom. It helps to have defined areas that you can select from so that you're not confused as to what is actually going to be 3D. You can use the feather tool for selection to modify it if you prefer, but I didn't do that here. Okay, then once you have that, you can just save it as a Photoshop file somewhere. It helps keep your Photoshop files everywhere in the same folder. I don't need to save this. And then you want to start a new project. Okay, so I'm going to make a new project. Don't need to save that. You know your layout. I'm going to say File, Import. I can choose my file. I've saved this as Sarah and Dave Working Document because that is my sister's name. It's going to ask you if you want to merge the layers. You do not want to merge the layers in this case because you're going to be using all of them, so you have to import one at a time. So I will do that right now. Okay, so now I have imported all of the different layers from the same file, and I can drag them on my timeline and arrange them in the order so that the background layer is in the back, foreground's in the front. You can add it just like Photoshop on top of it. Might have to do some rearranging, and that's fine. Okay, so background, this is the front grass, so I need to move that up. The tree is in fact in front of them, so everything is in the right order. Everything looks good. If I were to play it right now, nothing's happening because I just brought it into the composition. At this point, it's a good idea to go ahead and save your file so that you don't erase it or lose it, or if something happens and goes wrong, it's there. We'll be working with these layers. Because we're using a 3D effect, we want to actually make all these layers 3D. To do that, you can click on this little box area, and we're going to separate these layers and give some space. Now, the easiest way to see that is to change your view so you actually can see 2 views. So right now on the right hand side I have my active camera view, and on the left hand side is my top view. So what I can do is if I select on something and let's say move it here, I've selected my foreground, you can see it's highlighted, and if I move it towards the front, you can see that it separates from the other layers. So it takes a little bit of finessing to figure out what size and where these things go. So here's my tree, I'm going to move that up a little bit. Here's my sister and at the time her fiance. And then here's the background. The background you usually want to put way in the back, and you want to space these out. Depending upon where you put them is how 3D they're going to look. And you can also tell that my background layer shows a lot of black, and we don't want that. So I'm going to actually make this bigger to fill the frame. So you can tell now why you might fill in that empty white space that I mentioned earlier. So I think I like them where they are. The tree is a little off, so I might actually move that just slightly that way. Oh, but now the trees doesn't go all the way to the top, so I'm actually going to move that forward right there. And then I will move them as well. Now that looks nice. And then the front, I like to make that a little bigger so that I can see it. And I can tell that I need to move it up to cover that. So that's this first step of making your layers 3D, is actually separating them. Now that you've separated your layers, and just to show you another view of what that looks like, here they are from the side view. So you can see all the way in the back, tree, people, and grass. So we'll put that back on top. Now that you've done that, we need to create a camera to move through this space. So you can go up to composition, just getting layer, and say new, and then we're going to make camera. Whatever the settings are, I'm sure is fine, so you can just say OK. And now you have this camera. And you can see there's the top view of the camera there. It also is here, but you don't actually see it. So that is our view. So what we want to do is move our camera through this space. So for example, if you want to just see what that looks like, up here are some camera options. You can orbit it, track it, zoom in and out. If I just want to take and click and hold down and zoom in, there we go. Look at that nice casual zoom. And you can see my camera moving on the left hand side as well, because we're still in the 2-view mode, so that's fine. So what we're going to do is create some keyframes so that we can create the smoothest transition possible, and then you will have been moving through this created space. So I'm just going to start at the beginning. I'm going to make sure my playhead is at the beginning of my timeline, and now you can see different options under your camera, like transform. So here's all your options. You can do that. So now that we're here, I am at the starting point, I can begin. In this case, we're going to be using the position option here. So with our timeline at the beginning, I'm going to activate it. There's our keyframe. You can see it as a blue diamond here. I'm going to move my playhead forward to an area where I want to now change it. And I'm just going to click on this last option and drag to the right so that I am actually zooming in. And I'll probably go like right here is nice. That's good. And then I can see when I drag it, the action that it's taken, and I can play it as well to see what that looks like, if I like the pacing. If it's too short or too long, you can actually move the keyframes. You can move them together or independently just by selecting on them. So I could actually drag that over, and there we go. So you can play with these different types of options if you want the camera to move up and down, let's say, or if you want it to actually rotate a little bit so that it turns, you can do that. But I think just a simple zoom is fine for what we want. And if you get really fancy with it, you can do things like adding text or maybe using the Puppet Warp tool to make each person move, so you could do that. I'm going to watch that one more time to make sure I like it. There we go, that looks great. So now that I have that effect, I'm going to make sure that I save it. And then I can go ahead and do other things or add it to my Premiere, whatever I want to do. If you want to export it, you can just say File, Add to Render Queue. Make sure that, just as a reminder, even though you know this already, you want to choose it in the same location. Right now I have it in the folder with all the other files. I can call this Final Demo Version, and AVI is fine. I can say Save, and then I would go ahead, hit Render, and it will do that for me. I actually don't need this render since I've already done it once before, so I'm going to stop it. And there you go. If you want to watch this full screen, you can change your view back to one view, and there we are. Ta-da! There you go.